It feels like going into Final Fantasy 16 when we first started hearing about this game, hearing about what it was going to be like, how it was going to be structured. Like the big thing Square Enix was trying to do was trying to push Yoshi P, the man behind Final Fantasy 14, as being like the next big game god, right? The next big game producer that we would worship and like be follow behind after Miyazaki and Itsuno. This was going to be the guy that was going to be like heading up the next big wave of great Final Fantasy games from Square Enix, right? This is the guy that saved Final Fantasy 14. This is the guy who's been making Square Enix all this money. This is the guy who's going to make Final Fantasy great again. He's going to be the next big thing, right? That was the narrative that we've been sold. And unlike with Itsuno and Miyazaki, who have successfully been shilled as the next big thing and are the big creators that people talk about now, like Yoshi P seems to have fallen flat on his face, right? And I don't know exactly who to blame for this. Is it Yoshi P himself? Is it Square Enix? Is it like Final Fantasy? Is it like just I don't really know, but what it comes down to really is that it doesn't matter because, the attempts at like trying to promote this guy as the next big thing have failed, right? So with that in mind, it feels as if like more and more these creators that are pushed by the industry, people like Phil Fish, people like Toby Fox, people like people like Yoshi P, like the people that like the industry wants you to like, that wants you to support, that wants you to buy their games, like these people are becoming harder and harder to sell to the public, right? When Kojima first came on the scene, he was like pretty successfully like shilled as like the sole creator behind Metal Gear Solid. Like fuck like fuck the other guy, like fuck the other creators, fuck everyone else that like on the Metal Gear team. Like it was entirely like Kojima's brainchild, right? Everything Kojima did was gold. Like never mind Metal Gear Solid 2 being disappointed, never mind 4 being like a complete mess, never mind like all the spin-offs that like Kojima never had like any hand in, like never mind like how the inferior NES like Metal Gear port had like legit fans back in the day. Never mind how Kojima has never made anything relevant other than like Metal Gear Solid like since he departed from Konami. Like never mind like the failure of Death Stranding. Never mind like everything else that's happened. Like back in the 90s, Kojima was shilled as like this master game designer, like this innovator, this like major thing. And maybe to a certain extent it was true. Like, I like Kojima's games. Like I'm a fan of like classic Metal Gear Solid, but like there was no real questioning this back in the 90s, right? People were eager to learn more about creators of games and give credit when credit was due and like talk about the people who made great video games. And the thing is, the great creators these days are established, right? We know about the Miyamotos, we know about the Anomas, we know about the Sakamotos, right? We know about the great people at Nintendo who make all of these games. And as a result of that, it's getting harder and harder to really take like game journos shilling for certain people all that seriously. When you just compare it to like what other people have done in the past, right? The big thing with Toby Fox is that like, oh man, he's a single man making this game. Notch did the same thing with Minecraft, and Minecraft is bigger than Undertale will ever be, right? It's more innovative, it's more iconic, it's more memorable, it has more fans. Like, it's a better game in general, right? Like the entire narrative that Toby Fox like ripping off a bunch of JRPG cliches and then selling them to Americans, to his American audience who had never heard of them before was like some big impressive thing. Like, I think like 2015 was like kind of the last time that ever happened. Ever since then, like people have become more skeptical of what they've been told about these creators, right? People are starting to ask more questions and like point out things more often. I've seen Kojima has kind of lost a lot of his credibility. I've seen people, questioning Square Enix and their creators. I've seen people talking about these developers in general, right? Like people don't have faith in these game companies to deliver anymore. And as a result of it, like more and more of these creators that are trying to be shilled that Square Enix wants you to support, people like Yoshi P are, hyped up and then forgotten about, or, even becoming controversial in their own right. Like Yoshi P, I think, isn't really going to be talked about like going forward. I think people are just going to ignore him. But like, let's not forget what happened going into this, right? Let's not happen what the early stages of Final Fantasy 16's promotion was like, where people were being told that this guy was going to head up Final Fantasy 16 and he was going to save it, just like he saved Final Fantasy 14. And right from the onset, I told you that it was just not going to happen.